All right, welcome everyone to Lawrence Hill Online, a very special virtual and in-person event where we get to hear from the legendary Canadian author, Lawrence Hill, as he tells us about his new book for kids, Beatrice and Croc Harry. My name is Lindsay, and I'm a children's librarian here at the Vancouver Public Library. And we are so thrilled to be able to partner with Simon Fraser University's Belzberg Library to have this opportunity to bring such a special speaker to you today. We are gathered here today, both virtually and in person, on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And for our online friends, if you would like to share the ancestral homelands that you are joining us today from, please feel free to go ahead and enter that into the chat now. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. To all of the kids who are joining us here in person, we really appreciate your quiet attention so that everyone online can hear our speakers nice and clearly. This presentation is being recorded, so after, if you want to share it with your friends so they can watch at their convenience, we would love for you to do that. And we are very excited to be giving away 5 signed copies of Beatrice and Croc Harry to some of our local Vancouver schools. So if you have not entered into our giveaway, please feel free to put the name of your school in the chat right now, and we will be drawing those winners later. If you are one of the winners, you do need to pick up your copy at a local Vancouver library. For our online friends, if you would like to see the live transcript, you can go ahead and click the button at the bottom of your screen that says CC to start seeing the subtitles. And if you need any technical help, we have our online host, Sabrina, and she'll be able to help you. Just go ahead and type in your answers in the chat box. At the end of our talk, we will have a few minutes for some questions. So if you are in our audience today and a question comes into your mind, save that, and we will have a chance to answer a few of those. Lastly, if you would like a chance to read Beatrice and Croc Harry and all the myriad other stories we have at the Vancouver Public Library, the Summer Reading Club has started. So you can register right now online. Just go to vpl.ca/kids, and we would love for you to sign up. You can read this book and others and join us all summer long. So without further ado, I'm going to be introducing Ebony. Ebony Magnus is a librarian at the Simon Fraser University. And even before becoming a librarian, she loved visiting the library and reading books, especially those with bold, adventurous girls as the main character, which is very fitting for today. So please welcome Ebony and Lawrence.
Hi, everyone. I am very delighted to be with you today and to be able to introduce Lawrence Hill. Lawrence Hill has been writing actively since he was 6, and he had to write a letter to his father requesting permission to get a cat. He got the cat and just kept writing. He has written 11 books and has found readers across Canada and around the world. So please join me in welcoming Lawrence Hill.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Vancouver Public Library. I've been here before. It's wonderful to be back. It's been some years. Thank you to Lindsay Pabenhoff and Kelly Savage, Sadie Tucker, and also Sabrina, the technician. Wonderful to be here. And thank you so much to Ebony Magnus from Simon Fraser University for organizing this event. I live in Hamilton, Ontario, and I have 5 children who are all grown adults now, and I love to tell them stories when I was a young father and they were young children, and we'll come back to that when Ebony and I chat. But basically, without telling you too much, Beatrice and Croc Harry is a story about a girl in her very difficult, testy relationship with a 700-pound crocodile. The crocodile is named Harry and has a huge vocabulary, is a fast-talking crocodile with a big appetite. And of course, she's not entirely sure whether they can be friends, whether he's going to make her his breakfast. And so it's a story about their friendship and their search for her own identity. And in a nutshell, she wakes up alone in a huge forest with no memory, no idea who she is, doesn't even know her last name, doesn't know where she is. There are no other people in this forest. She has no idea why she's been kicked out of the human race. And the story is about her beginning, with Croc Harry's help, to piece her identity back together and to see if she can learn about herself and find out about this world that has kicked her out, but that she wants to get back to. And I'm going to begin with just a very short reading of a page or two from the opening of the book, which is waking up in a state of complete confusion. The chapter, I love to give titles to chapters in books. And the title of this first chapter is An Awful Lot of Places for Something to Go Wrong. And with Ebony, I'm just going to give a couple short readings today. And this one's just a page and a half, just to give you a sense of what it sounds like and how the story starts. Beatrice was not entirely sure if she was dead. She raised 2 fingers to her lips and felt her own warm breath. She appeared to be awakening from a deep, dark dream in which she'd either died or come close to it. As she opened her eyes and studied her circumstances, the facts confirmed that she was alive. She didn't know much, but she knew this. Her name was indeed Beatrice. It had a certain flow, 3 syllables and never just 2. Thank you very much. Beatrice was lying in a single bed in a 1-room wooden cabin. She'd never slept in that bed before or seen the cabin. She had no idea what awaited her outside except an incessant woodpecker. 8 pecks in a row, pause, another 8 pecks, and again, and again. There was nothing like a woodpecker to get her attention. It sounded like an electric hammer in the hands of a toddler. The message, being banged right into the gray matter of her brain, seemed to say, I am here and you are there, and if you don't get up this very second, I'm going to tap, 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 until you go completely mad. Beatrice swung her legs off the bed, straight ahead, 3 rows of shelves stacked with books. To her left, a bedside table, and on it, 2 more books. On top was a manual with purple handwriting on the cover. It said, Survival Tips, Argelia Forest, 2090. Beatrice turned to the first page, which consisted of a message in purple ink. Outhouse is outside. Climb down the ladder and head to the river. Ladder? River? Outhouse? Was this some sort of joke? That's how the story starts.
Can you read the last sentence because it's my page?
Was this some sort of joke? Yeah. Oh yes. Let's see. Right up to that word?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll read a little bit more. I'll take you to another page of this story. The second book on the bedside table was filled with the same handwriting. Each letter was tiny and printed and looked like it had been smacked into place by a typewriter key. Typewriters? How did she even know about typewriters? Beatrice remembered nothing about herself or her past, except for her first name. But she knew about typewriters. Once, she had seen several of them in a museum and was quite sure that she had laughed as she pounded the keys and slammed the carriage return and rolled out a sheet of paper. For a girl who did not know her own age or the name of her mother, if she had a mother, Beatrice found it unsettling that she could recall typewriters and the museum sign that said that people had used them as recently as a century ago. Perhaps the second book would explain who she was. Nope, no such luck. It was a dictionary as thick as 2 bricks, so heavy she needed both hands to pick it up. It was entitled The St. Lawrence Dictionary of Only the Best Words, Real and Concocted. Beatrice sighed. She was hungry and in no mood to be trifled with. Still, she was curious. She flipped open the dictionary and landed on the B page. Beatrice, that is your name. Well, thanks for the information. She read on. Bumfuzzled, to be utterly confused and somewhat dazzled. That pretty well summed things up. She was bumfuzzled. Absolutely, totally, completely bumfuzzled.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite words from the book, which is why I wanted you to read a little further. I also love the dictionary in the back of the book. It might be my favorite part. So bumfuzzled, that's one of the words you invented for the book?
I love that word. And I wish I could say that I had invented bumfuzzled, but I did not. I'd like to claim it, but it would
In
be,
my books, you did.
it would be fraudulent. I've seen it once in my life before, and I do a lot of research for the books that I write. And I was researching a book, and I was reading an oral history that would be an interview with an old man, an old Black man who was an American who had been enslaved, and then he was free. So this interview was taken a long time ago. It was taken in the 1800s, and it was written down. So I was reading a transcript of this interview of this old man remembering his days as an enslaved person in the United States. And he referred to the word bumfuzzled when he was talking about something that had confused him. And I was delighted by this word. I'd never seen it before. I completely understood the context because it was clear that it meant confused. And so that's the only time in my life I've seen the word in an interview with an old man who had once been enslaved.
Well, hopefully it comes back into use
I would
by
love to see
exposing
it
so
come
many
back.
readers to it. But you did make up some words.
Lots of words.
Okay, why did you feel the need to make up words?
Haven't you ever made up a word? When you were growing up, didn't you have some playful or just ridiculous or over the top invented words in your own family?
Yes, my nickname was Princess Mac. My brothers made that up.
Princess Mac.
Yeah.
I like the princess part too.
Yes,
Well, that's what you get when you're the only girl with 3 brothers. Yeah,
it's true.
Princess Mac. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, my father was an African American, and my mother was a white American, and they fell in love at a time that they really couldn't be together in the United States. And so they moved to Canada the day after they married and raised a family, my brother and sister and me, in Toronto. And on one hand, my father was a very serious man. You know, he spent his life, as did my mother, fighting for human rights and combating racism. He pretty well created the Ontario Human Rights Commission, as well as the Ontario Black History Society. There were lots of conversations at home. And he was a sociologist. He had a PhD from the University of Toronto, and he could speak like a very serious man. But he could also slide really quickly into this ridiculously playful, silly language. And he could imitate animal sounds, and he'd been a soldier at war, and he'd heard all the smack talk and the loud, rude language that soldiers can use, and he'd slide all over the place. He could start a sentence sounding like a university professor and finish a sentence sounding like he was standing in a bar with a bunch of soldiers. And so he really was a very entertaining speaker, and he made up words. And so it was just part of the love of language, you know, that I grew up with. And I was fascinated to listen to him slide, even in one sentence, from sounding like a formal university professor to somebody who was just like having a drink in a bar and really being very exuberant, and also really invoking a lot of speech that reflected his own upbringing, you know, in the States as a Black man. And so language play was really part of my childhood. And I'm a writer. How can you be a writer and not love words? And words are sometimes ridiculous. So the more ridiculous, the better, because you can play with them and make fun of them. So I made up a bunch of words with my kids when they were young and told them ridiculous stories. And I've always loved the play of language. It's been one of my joys in life.
I think Beatrice has some of the talent of your father to speak in such a profound way and then inject fun and made up words of her own on the spot. Aciditudinous was one of my
Yes,
favorites.
aciditudinous. Yeah, you got a big attitude, and that's a made up word, aciditudinous, because the crocodile is mad at her at one point. He calls her attitudinous, and she doesn't like being called attitudinous, like she has a big attitude, and she finds that condescending, a little insulting. So she comes right back and calls him aciditudinous, which means stubborn like a donkey. So yeah, there are some made up words in the book. One of my favorite is decrocustation.
I was convinced for part of the book that was an actual like biological process.
Well, maybe it is. If you happen, well, first of all, little biological tip. Crocodiles, although they can have like 69 teeth and they keep regrowing, they bust a tooth, it grows back. A crocodile can regrow the same tooth 20 times, in a lifetime. But crocodiles, even though their teeth look so fearsome and ugly, sticking out of their jaws even when their mouth is shut, they don't chew. They just rip and they swallow whole. And so they have to digest this huge amount of meat that they swallowed whole by using stones in their belly that they swallow, and also their stomach acid's powerful. So if you happen, just for your information, to be eaten by a crocodile or swallowed whole, you have a short window of time to get out alive because you've been swallowed whole. And the process is called decrocustation. Kind of like pole vaulting yourself out of the belly of a crocodile. You take a run and you pull down this valve called a palatal valve, and you hurl yourself back out before the stomach acid incinerates you. And so in the book, a bunch of rabbits get swallowed by a crocodile, and they're able to get out by means of decrocustation. So that is one of the words that I made up in the book.
Makes sense to me. And I didn't know we were going to get survival tips this morning. So thank you for that. The words, though, so you gave us the definition for aciditudinous. And as I said, the dictionary at the back of the book, the glossary, is one of my favorite parts. Did you include it just to define those made up words?
Well, I haven't counted, but there's probably like 10 or 20 made up words in the book. I don't know how many. And then there's a bunch of other words that are kind of unusual, or really big words, or strange words, or complicated words. And I like those words too. And this crocodile is always spouting these big words at Beatrice, trying to draw her closer and make like he's going to be a friend, and then perhaps he'll try to eat her. And so once he can draw her closer with these big words and everything. And so I decided to have a mixture of made up words and kind of more unusual or strange or big words that I find kind of entertaining. And so then I tried to define them in the book so you're not all confused. So if you come across a word on page 7 that seems very weird, usually the context, you'll understand probably basically what it means, even if you've never seen the word before, or even if I made it up. But in addition to trying to explain the words contextually, I did write this very playful dictionary at the back of the book, which is called the St. Lawrence Dictionary of Only the Best Words Real and Concocted. And the word concocted means made up. And I tried to write a playful, fun dictionary. I love dictionaries. I always have. And so, yeah, there's a dictionary at the back of the book, and for a lot of these words, and I had to fight to get the publisher to let me use it.
Yeah, you don't often see dictionaries at the back of novels.
That's what my editor said. No, Larry, people call me Larry. No, you can't have a dictionary. Well, why can't I? Well, people don't put dictionaries at the back of books for children. Well, is that any reason not to, just because other people don't usually do that? I learned since that there have been 1 or 2 occasions in children's literature where there are dictionaries in the back of books, but it's quite rare. And she just said no. And at first I accepted her no. But then my wife kept pushing me. She said, no, don't take that no. Like, you love that dictionary, don't you? I said, yes, I do. Well, fight for it. So I finally went back and argued around the 3rd draft. And I said, Suzanne, I really love that dictionary and I want to keep it. And she said, okay, well, you have to cut it back by about 50% because right now it's like 50 pages, but you have to cut it back, but you can keep it. And so.
So you're telling me there's more to the dictionary
There
that
is.
we didn't get to see.
There was a lot more.
Well, I've talked to a lot of people who want a sequel, so maybe the rest of the dictionary can.
I've already been thinking about fun words for the sequel.
Yes. Now it's taken right out of my head what I was going to ask you next because I'm so excited about this dictionary. Beatrice's treehouse is full of books. Are those some of your favorite books that you find in Beatrice's treehouse?
Yes. Well, she wakes up in this treehouse and she has no idea who she is or why she's there or anything. She has no memory of anything to do with her life. But she has books and she has food in the treehouse. And first of all, frankly, if I were to wake up in a forest with no other people for company, I'd appreciate some books.
Yeah.
And I'd also wouldn't mind having a bit of food in that treehouse. And I love tree houses, and I always have. So I would appreciate having food and books in a treehouse if I were abandoned and all alone in the forest. I'd like some good books. And so, yes, there are some books mentioned, in the treehouse that I love too. There's a book written by a Vancouver writer that I quite love. Her name is Susan Nielsen, and it's called The Reluctant Journal of Henry K. Larson. I love that story. It is a wild, entertaining, wonderful story. It's both sad and serious, lighthearted, but I think very deep. And I actually like a story that explores painful issues, which this book does, but that also can be funny. And it's actually hard. It's hard to write something that is serious and explores painful issues, but also makes the reader laugh. And it's not easy to do as an artist, I have to say. And so Susan Nielsen in that book, The Reluctant Journal of Henry K. Larson, does that, and that you might be interested since she's a Vancouver novelist and also a filmmaker who lives not too far from here, actually. So that's one of the books that's mentioned.
I love to read, as Lindsay told everyone, and I also love to listen to stories. I remembered what I was going to say. I listened to the audiobook of Beatrice and Croc Harry in addition to reading it, and I was thrilled that you read the dictionary out at the end of the audiobook. Do you prefer to read stories or hear stories told to you?
Well, I love having something read to me. Mm-hmm. I love to read. And if it's really complicated, like a really dense text, I do better if I'm reading it myself. It's harder for me to absorb if somebody's reading something really complex to me. Yeah. I don't seem to be able to hold the details so much. Mm-hmm. But if it's something a little lighter or more playful, or just has a bit of rhythm to it or sound or feeling, something more emotional, then I love to have that read to me. And, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give to a child is to read to them or just to be seen reading. Even if your kid's over here and you're here and you're both reading, it's a really great thing to do for young people. But when the audiobook possibility came along, the publisher asked me if I'd like to, and I said, well, why don't you hire an actor, like a professional? They'll do a much better job. And they said, well, yes, Larry, they would do a better job. They're a professional actor, but people want to hear you because it's your book. So they want to hear you reading it because it'll matter to them that the author is reading the book. So even though it won't be as good or as professionally rendered as an actor, you should do it anyway. So I gave it a try.
I think you've got a career in voice acting. It was very good. And this story of Beatrice and Croc Harry came from stories that you would tell out loud. Can you?
It did. Well, I have 5 children, and the younger 2 came to me in a blended family. So I had 3 children, and my wife, Miranda, had 2, and we met and married, and suddenly we each had 5 kids in our household. And so the younger 2 were like 3 and 5 when they came into my life, and Beatrice was the youngest of the whole crowd of 5 children. The Beatrice, like the real Beatrice, my daughter Beatrice, who's now 23 years old. And so to bond with her and to really work, you have to work to create a relationship with a child who suddenly enters your life. Like it's not a given that there's love at first sight. You have to work at building a relationship with a child who enters your life like that. And so one of the ways I really wanted to kind of develop a good relationship with her was to tell her bedtime stories. And I don't know why, but she loved hearing me tell stories about a girl named Beatrice, a fictional girl. That's the trick. In a bedtime story, make the hero a little bit like the listener, and it really hooks the interest of the listener. And the stories were about a girl who was always fighting off a hungry crocodile. And every night he would almost eat her or kill her. And every night at the last minute, she would outfox the crocodile, live another day. And perhaps another child would have found those stories scary, but Beatrice loved them. She found them very entertaining. And the fictional Beatrice, always had really clever, fun, inventive, silly ways to trick the crocodile to, avoid the jaws of death. And so Beatrice loved these stories and made me promise that one day I'd turn them into a novel and use her name.
Was one of the tricky ways she got away with sticky oatmeal?
She glued, yes, I did actually make that up in the bedtime story. The crocodile was going to eat her, and she had this really sticky oatmeal, which was combined with peanut butter and honey and stuff. So it was really sticky, and it kind of worked like glue. And she glued together the teeth of the crocodile with her sticky peanut butterish oatmeal, so he couldn't eat her anymore, and because his mouth was glued shut for weeks. And so that was indeed one of the techniques that she used when I told those bedtime stories. Yeah.
Can we meet Croc Harry?
Sure, we can meet Croc Harry. I like the way you say that. That was great. So here we are. I'm going to read you an abbreviated section when she meets Croc Harry, and it'll take just a few minutes. Okay, so basically, she's outside, and this is the beginning of the novel, and she's starting to make oatmeal for breakfast, and here's where it begins. With her hatchet, Beatrice chopped some dead branches into kindling and started a fire. She set the pot down on the grate. Beatrice had no idea if she had a mother, father, sister, or brother, or why someone had left her in a treehouse with instructions. But she knew how to make oatmeal. To the water, she added oats and all the additional ingredients. Cooking comforted her. It gave her something to do. Beatrice prepared to pour her breakfast into the bowl, but the pot had no handle. So she had to return to the treehouse for oven mitts. She stuffed the slingshot in her pocket, filled the spare pot with river water, and carried it back toward the treehouse. As she walked, she felt irritation about not knowing where she had come from. But whatever the country, city, or village, Beatrice felt in her bones that something had gone wrong. She kept checking her arms and legs. No scratches. No broken bones. There were any number of vital organs in her body. For instance, heart, lungs, kidneys, pancreas. So there were an awful lot of places for something to go wrong. The dream suggested that some part of her body was broken or damaged, but everything seemed to be working. She was in no pain. Still, it was frustrating not to be able to walk up to a person and ask for explanations. This put her in such an irritable mood that she put down the pot of water, pulled a slingshot from her pocket, placed a stone in the sling, pulled back hard, and let it fly. The stone shot through the air and thwacked against something. From behind some bushes, she heard a low, angry voice. "Watch it." The bushes parted. Beatrice clenched her slingshot. The voice came at her again. "Some people have no clue, no brought-upsy, no manners at all, throwing stones here, there, and everywhere." It was a deep-throated, irritated, expressive voice. Beatrice understood every word, but the voice did not seem human. She took a step back as the thrashing continued and the bushes parted. There, before her, appeared an immense crocodile. She guessed that it was at least 3 times the length of her body. Its scales were soaking wet. In the sunlight, they shimmered a deep, rich turquoise. Although the blue-green color looked like it came from a beautiful jewel, the reptile terrified her. Its thick, powerful tail swished. It unhinged its jaws to reveal 2 rows of sharp teeth. Its breath smelled like rotting meat. It looked her up and down as she froze in her tracks. The crocodile straightened its legs to lift the front of its body off the ground. It looked like it was doing a push-up. "Who in tarnation are you?" the crocodile asked. It thumped its tail twice. Beatrice felt the vibrations under her feet. So that's how Beatrice and Croc Harry first meet.
Kind of scary meeting,
Yeah,
but they become friends
they do.
and they start to trust each other.
It takes a while, but they
Yeah.
have to form a truce.
Yeah.
They have to, and I didn't want the whole story to be about will he, won't he, kill her. I wanted them to move quickly to a more interesting place.
Mhm.
And so pretty early in the story, they agree that he's not gonna attempt to kill her.
Mhm.
He's gonna be her friend. He promises solemnly. She believes him. And they go on, and I've always been interested in relationships between people who really don't belong together,
Mhm.
or shouldn't be friends.
Mhm.
And I thought it was really interesting to explore the idea of girl and crocodile and, the predator and the prey.
Yeah.
But somehow she has to turn this predator into an ally, which so many people have had to do in life.
It's true. And then she goes on to meet other friends and other foes. And I was interested because she does become friends with Croc Harry, but she doesn't become friends with everyone, right? And she has another scary encounter, a few, with Brian the giant. So why was she able to gain that trust with Croc Harry and become his friend? And what's different about Brian the giant that didn't have that happen? Spoiler.
Well, I mean, if you're writing a story about 2 people and they go into a donut shop and they have a nice coffee or donut and hot chocolate and it's really tasty, and then they just end their visit and go away, well, there's no story, because there's no conflict, there's no disaster, there's no trouble, nobody's been kind of knocked off balance emotionally or physically. And stories, they're situated in trouble. And we read them because we want to know how people are going to crawl out of this terrible situation they've got themselves in. If there's no trouble, there ain't no story. You have to have trouble, pressure. Somebody's got to be in a bad situation. And basically, it should start bad and it should get worse. And that's the making of a good story. And so Beatrice has to have some things that are causing her trouble. And since her relationship with Croc Harry should move, I hope, into a really beautiful place about a beautiful, unexpected friendship between 2 beings that don't really belong together. The trouble, after she learns that he's not going to kill her, the trouble has to come from somewhere else, because Croc Harry's not going to be her enemy for the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
So the trouble has to come from other places, a really unrelenting and painful trouble. So she runs into a very hostile being called the giant, who's trying to take over her mind. And there are other troubles too that you'll discover if you choose to read the book. But so there have to be some sources of real danger for her, even though it's not going to come ultimately from Croc Harry. And one of the things in drama, in fiction, is that the person causing the danger has to be at least as powerful as the victim, because if the person causing you danger, whether it's psychological, emotional, or physical, or everything, if they're not at least as powerful as you, there's no real threat. And so to make the reader feel the danger, the predator has to be powerful. Mm-hmm. So the giant is a very powerful being, and she's afraid.
She is afraid, but she's very brave.
She is. She's a lot braver than I was as a child.
I would agree for myself. How did she get so brave? I mean, she doesn't even have a memory of where she came from.
I love this girl. Well, I mean, there's physical bravery, but there's also emotional bravery. And when I was growing up in Toronto in the early 1960s, in a pretty well entirely white suburb, but with a black father and a black but mixed race identity myself, it was kind of hard to figure out who I was and where I belonged and what my own identity was. It wasn't easy in my neighborhood where there were no other black families to sort of come to a good way of thinking about myself. It took some work, as a child to come to a good place. And I had to kind of work to struggle to define myself. And I think that's one of the reasons why I became a writer, because I was on the page, I was reading and I was writing to sort of define myself and to move into a positive sense of racial identity. And Beatrice is very confident about this. She's black, but she doesn't really know it or think about it at first because, come on, you wake up in a forest alone. You're not thinking necessarily about whether you're black. You're thinking about whether this crocodile is going to kill you. Your identity is going to come to you, like say a racial identity, as a result of how you interact with other people. But if there's no other people, you're not going to be thinking about that. But Beatrice slowly grows into a sense of her identity. She shows that by working with her hair. She loves her hair. There's no hair products, but she has to figure out in the forest how to work with her beautiful hair without any hair products around. And so I love her confidence. And I didn't have that confidence as a child, but I feel that every child should. And every child should love the way they look and accept it. You don't get to choose who you are or how you look. You don't get to choose these things. You're just born. And I think that children should be able to feel confident that they're beautiful and accept who they are and how they're made. And Beatrice does. And I wish I had been able to do that too. It took me a little while, but she has that confidence from the word go.
And I think that Horace also has some of that confidence. Horace, well, describing yourself and kind of seeking information and reading as a kid, I see a little bit of Horace maybe in you as a child, but he also has that confidence that he's going to learn. He is insistent that Beatrice lesson him. Did some of Horace's personality come from you thinking about yourself?
Yes, Horace is a rabbit who wants to learn. He's a high jumping rabbit. And he's, kind of annoying but lovable, and he can't pronounce his R. So his name is Harrison Jr. the Third. He can't quite get his mouth around the R's, but he's very thirsty to learn. He really wants to learn. Excuse me. And he's been denied the opportunity to learn. And in the course of human history, when people wanted to mistreat other people and prevent them from being equal members of society, and this very much applies to people who've been enslaved, they weren't allowed to learn to read and write. They weren't allowed to be educated. They weren't allowed to go to school. This was true in Canada, in the United States, and in many other countries too. If you wanted to mistreat a person or enslave them, you make it illegal for them to learn how to read and write. And so Horace, in a way, he represents the hunger that people have if they haven't been allowed to read and write. Of course, they want to learn to be full citizens and to enter the world fully. And reading and writing is kind of like unlocking the whole world. So he's really hungry, not just intellectually, but it's going to make him feel like a full person, a full rabbit. And so, he really wants to learn to read and write, and he wants Beatrice to teach him.
Can I ask you to read one more section with Horace? Because
Yes.
I know I said the glossary was my favorite, but hearing you read Horace's parts in the audiobook was also top notch.
I will read just a little bit about that. Did I give you the page number for that?
I think so. Is it chapter 4?
Yes, here we are. Thank you. Yes, that's it. 41. Okay, so I'm just going to go straight to this scene. So this is in the middle of chapter 4, called Horace Harrison Jr. the Third. and she's in her treehouse, and then she has the annoying awareness that she's got to go to the bathroom, which means she's got to leave the treehouse and go to the outhouse. However, she had to go to the bathroom. She hated that. Why was it that every single time she yawned and was ready to sleep, she'd get a little ding, ding, ding from her bladder? Her bladder seemed to call out at her like a bird pecking at the door. Time to pee, time to pee. She took a careful look out the window. She walked out the door, climbed down the rope ladder, and began the 6-minute walk to the outhouse that faced Argelian Mountain. Beatrice sat down in the outhouse, appreciating the thick pink styrofoam toilet seat. She closed the door. She felt grateful that she'd repaired her slingshot and had it with her, just in case the tall man from her dreams reappeared. Suddenly, the door creaked open an inch. "Keep out, and who's there?" she shouted. "Croc Harry, is that you? This is not one bit funny." The door closed, then it opened again. The door creaked. A large speckled rabbit opened the door, hopped inside, stole the single roll of toilet paper that was sitting on the shelf beside Beatrice, and hopped back outside. The door clattered shut. Beatrice muttered. She felt relieved that she wasn't being attacked, but now she was angry. "Hey, that's my toilet paper, bring it back." A small, annoying voice called out with a trace of a whine. "Don't hey me, I have a name, and it's Howard Harrison Jr. III. However, the rabbit could not pronounce the consonant R and turned it into a W. "Never barge in on someone in the bathroom," Beatrice said. She could hear him hopping up and down. She hoped he was not hopping on the roll of toilet paper. "I will give back the toilet paper under one condition," Horace said. "Not negotiating," she called out. "Come on, work with me." "I do not negotiate with thieves of toilet paper." "You have books, White? Your own library?" "How did you know about that?" Beatrice asked. "Everyone is talking about the two-legger who weeds under the 3-fruit tree. You're Beatrice, famous in the forest." "Flattery will get you nowhere. The toilet paper now." "One condition," he said. "Lesson me. I want lessoning right now. I can already weed and write." "Would you say that again?" When he repeated himself, Beatrice understood that he meant to say already read and write. So it goes on from there, but that's how they meet, as he steals her toilet paper and wants to be taught to read in exchange for giving it back.
And then he follows her through the book. Why? She's, as we know from the book, quite a leader. And Croc, Harry, and Harrison both follow her. What makes her such a good leader?
I think she listens. She is confident, but she doesn't tell people what to do. And she is empathetic. You know, she wants to know what's going on, and she wants to know what what animals are experiencing. It feels like people to her because they have human-like personalities, even though they're animals, and they all talk. Mysteriously, in this forest, Beatrice can speak with every animal, even with spiders and ants. And I think she's a good leader because she loves the people that she meets if they show her some kindness, but she's not overbearing. And she also loves herself, and she puts up with no nonsense. Mm-hmm. And so animals just kind of gravitate to her. She's a natural leader.
Speaking of all those animals, how did you decide what animals she would encounter? And was it about their personalities that gave them their animal form? Or did you choose the animal first?
Sometimes people ask me that, and they say, well, why did you make Croc Harry a crocodile? Couldn't he have been like a grizzly bear or something? Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, yeah, sure, he could have been a grizzly bear. But for one thing, for reasons that you'll discover later, she needs to meet an animal and become close friends with an animal who's an excellent swimmer. An excellent swimmer. And so crocodiles, of course, are great swimmers. But also, she needed to meet an animal that posed a threat, that initially would appear to be a predator. So I guess a grizzly bear could have done, except that they don't swim like super well. And it's got to be a predator. And I wanted to be an animal that you wouldn't normally ever associate with the possibility of human friendship. Because I like the idea of exploring an unlikely relationship. And so, like in another book I've written, there's a close friendship between a man who's an undocumented refugee, who's an elite marathon runner. He's a young man, and he forms a very close friendship with a very old woman. And they kind of need each other, and they form a really beautiful friendship. And you wouldn't normally expect this, this relationship to develop, but they do form this friendship. And so I am interested in unlikely unions between people. And so I suppose it could have been another kind of animal, but a crocodile seemed about right. Plus, their biology fascinates me. Like, you've probably heard the term crocodile tears, like it means like fake or phony tears. Crocodiles actually do cry. They actually do have tears. When their eyeballs get too dry, they have to rinse them out. And let's say if they're out of the water, and they have this thing called the nictitating membrane. I know that sounds like a ridiculous word, but that's actually a true word. Some other animals have that too. I think cats have a nictitating membrane, and it's like another eyelid, and it helps you water the eye if it gets kind of dry. So in crocodiles, like they swallow stones in order to crush the food in their bellies since they don't chew, and those stones are called gastroliths. This is also true. And so they have fascinating elements of their biology, but they look so threatening that I thought, well, let's pair Beatrice with an animal that seems like a really dangerous, threatening predator, because that would make the relationship more interesting. I
am very afraid of spiders, and I think that's when I started to wonder about your animal choices, was when she meets Fuzzy the tarantula, who I quite like. Fuzzy's, I think, one of my favorite characters. So that.
But when you were a child, did you read Charlotte's Web?
I did, and Charlotte was okay, but I didn't like any of the spiders I met in real life. Yeah.
But Charlotte the spider was okay.
Yes.
Now, when I read Charlotte's Web, before I read that book, it's a book about a relationship between a spider and a pig. If for those of you who haven't read it, and a girl, if you haven't read it already, you must. It's like a fantastic, in my opinion, a fantastic book. But I had always feared and kind of been disgusted by spiders. But once I read that book, I'm not saying like spiders became my friends, but I was fascinated by them. It's like it opened up my eyes to the beauty and the marvel. The things they can do are like spectacular. And so I started to admire spiders for the first time in life as a result of reading Charlotte's Web.
I grew up in a place that had big spiders and black widows. So I have a healthy respect and I keep a distance from them. And I will acknowledge that some are pretty, but still not my favorite. Yeah, well, and of course, Beatrice encounters this tarantula named Fuzzy. And it so happens that the most toxic, even in a made-up book, I had to do a lot of research. And I learned in researching, in addition to stuff about crocodile biology, that the most toxic and dangerous tarantula in the world is actually colored blue. And it's called the blue sapphire tarantula. And it comes from India. True fact. And so I decided to make Fuzzy a blue sapphire tarantula. And so basically she's the most toxic tarantula in the world. And if you're small, she could kill you. If you're big, she could really stun you and cause you great, great pain and agony and some partial paralysis. And so Beatrice befriends Fuzzy. Again, now Fuzzy's tiny, whereas Croc Harry's huge. But again, she's forming a relationship with somebody who could really hurt her. But instead, they form this beautiful friendship, which I find quite beautiful. I know. It made me actually think maybe I want a little tarantula riding on my shoulder. I don't know though. If it's a sweet talking tarantula, maybe. Yes. So you mentioned doing a lot of research. So you didn't know all of that stuff about crocodiles? Oh no, I knew nothing about crocodiles before or about tarantulas. How do you go about researching for a novel that you're writing? I read articles, I watched videos, I even learned a lot about lemurs, a primate that I find fascinating. And I never really studied
lemurs before, and I know it's a bit like a monkey, another kind of primate. Lemurs dance. They have this amazing, this two-legged dance. They bounce up and down like vertically, like pogo sticks. Their legs are like super strong, and you can actually see videos, on YouTube of lemurs dancing and bouncing up and down in this really vigorous, incredibly athletic way. And so I watched some videos about crocodiles and lemurs and tarantulas. I read lots of articles. I read books about them. I have a book that's like this thick and this size, entirely about crocodile biology, like a real tome, like an encyclopedia of the crocodile biology. I didn't read the whole thing, but of course, I picked through it to look for interesting details. And I also talked to experts. Like if there's something I wasn't sure about after researching, I'd call up an expert and say, hey, can you explain to me about the toxicity in the belly in the acid of a crocodile? Like how come they can do this? They can chew up food just with their stomach acid.
And speaking of experts, did you talk to women about their hair?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up Black, but not being a girl and not having to deal with, a girl or a woman's hair. I never had that experience, even though there were lots of Black women in my family, and I was, lots of aunties and older cousins and lots of Black women that I grew up with. But since I wasn't one, and I'd never done my hair like that, I talked to about 6 or 7 Black women of different ages and who didn't know each other, about their experiences with hair. And many of them, I asked the question, well, if you were alone in the forest and you had no hair products and you're like Beatrice, how would you manage your hair? What would you do? And we started talking about that. And what would help, what wouldn't help, what kind of natural product might you find in the forest that could actually help you work with your hair. And so it was really interesting to have those conversations. One of the women I talked to was a Black hairdresser. So, I wanted to go to somebody who really knew what she was talking about because it was her job.
I think we have a few questions that some students who are watching have asked.
Is writing a book for children easier or more difficult than writing a book for adults? If you want to write a good book, it's hard work and it's never going to be easy. I hate to break it to you, even if it's your 11th book, as this one is for me. It was not easy at all. It was hard work. So it's neither easier nor more difficult. It's just another book, and they're all really hard. And frankly, if there's anything that you're really excited about doing in life and that really turns you on, I think you're going to find it hard. Like if you want to be a really wonderful violinist, I don't think you're going to find it easy, even though you might learn to love it and be a great violinist. So most things that you might really love and pursue for years, they are hard. You have a favorite book that you've written? No. That's kind of like asking if I have a favorite child. And I don't have a favorite child. I love them all in different ways. They're all different children. And you get criticized a lot in this world. And a lot of the criticism, I'm sure, is justified, but I don't want to be leading my own criticism or in battle with myself. And if I think that I have a favorite book, that means I have to have a least favorite book. And I want to just kind of accept each book I write as part of my own heart and what I was feeling at the time in life when I wrote that book. I like to think of my work as kind of being a mural, and each book is just another little piece that I've added to the mural that is my life's work. So I don't have a favorite book, and I try not to think about that as favorites and least favorites, because even though they're not perfect, and believe me, I know my books aren't perfect. You'd be hard pressed to find a person who thinks your books are perfect. We all see the mistakes and the problems and the weaknesses in our art. We're very conscious of that, but we just do it anyway, do the best we can.
I'm glad you do it anyway. I enjoy it.
So I don't have a favorite, and I try not to think that way. What inspired the book? Well, I told you about Beatrice and the bedtime story, so that's what inspired the book. What inspired the main character? Well, Beatrice in the book doesn't really resemble Beatrice, my daughter, except they both have very lively, confident personalities. But other than that, biographically speaking, they're entirely different people. I think often the best part of novel writing, fiction writing, is the imagination. is not necessarily something real. It's just something you feel, that you imagine, that you dream up. And that's why we write fiction instead of, say, writing a history book, which is a good thing to write, but not what I usually do. Because we love the idea of imagination, the stories that we can make up out of thin air. So Beatrice isn't inspired by a real person. She's just a character that I came to love, that I came to imagine. And that's, of course, what writers, that's what we do. We imagine things. What's my favorite word? Well, one of my favorite words is hypocrocholiterosis. And that is a problem in this world. And that is that crocodiles, like, they're reading less and less these days. They're not reading good books, and they're falling behind. They're not getting post-secondary education. They're not getting good jobs. And this phenomenon, like, it didn't used to be this way. Crocodiles used to read more and it was better. But these days they're really slacking off. They're not reading. The world's going apart. And so this problem with crocodiles not reading so much anymore is called crocohypoliterosis.
You need to get them back into the library.
Yeah, we do. On this floor. So that's one of my favorite words, and it also happens to be a made-up one. How do you develop good writing habits? I'm going to try to give you an unexpected answer, one that you might not think I'm going to give you. How do you develop good writing habits? There's this writer in Canada who's one of our most famous writers in the world. Her name is Alice Munro. She's won the Nobel Prize for Literature. I actually love her books. I've read most of them, I think, if not all. And Alice Munro once said that writers need time to look out the window. And if you're so busy that you can't just kind of relax and think and daydream, then where's your imagination going to come from? Where's your art going to come from? How are you going to have good ideas if all you do is run all day long and don't take any time for yourself to just dream and imagine? And so one of the best ways to develop good writing habits is to give yourself moments to just take it easy and slow down and look out the window and walk by a river and just let your imagination percolate. Because if you don't ever take time for, like, the percolation of your imagination, then you'll never really imagine any fun stuff. So I say one of the most important things for a writer to do is to give yourself time to just goof off and see where your mind goes and what you can imagine. Because it's hard to be artistic if you're just busy all the time, and you're so charged up and busy that you don't have time to just see what you've got down there in your heart.
Is this why you enjoy a good daily constitutional?
I do love a good long walk each day. I used to be a runner, and I loved to run, but then my knees got too sore after years and years of running, so now I just walk or ride a bike or something. Yeah, I find that it's a good way to just let your ideas evolve, and that's one of the words that I enjoy in the book. It's kind of a silly, very formal word, and we don't hear it too much these days, but it used to be that saying that you're going for a constitutional, among other, it can have different meanings, but one of the meanings is it means like you're going for a long walk, a long, leisurely, thoughtful walk. So yes.
Was that the last question on the?
How many revisions did you do?
Yeah.
I did 12. I wrote 12 drafts of this book. That's pretty typical for me. I write fast and messy, and I just try to let my ideas out flying without criticizing myself or thinking, oh, this is terrible. Just let it rip and see what I've got when I write a first draft. But it's going to be messy and unformed and kind of wild. And then I have to start cutting it back and rewriting a lot, adding characters, taking characters out, changing the ending, rewriting the beginning, adding a new chapter, changing my mind about things. And so I wrote 12 drafts. Yeah. The first draft took 6 months, and the other 12 drafts took about 18 months together. So the whole book was about 2 years. What subjects other than language arts contribute to being a good writer? Well, any subject can contribute to being a good writer. You could be a zoologist, you could be a veterinarian, you could be a bus driver, and a gardener.
An economist?
I studied economics at university, although I haven't really written about economics. In my fiction, you'd fall asleep. But I'm going to venture that one of the best things to study if you want to be a writer is other languages. And I think that I've learned French and Spanish, and I also loved Latin in school. And like learning other languages, in my case, French and Spanish, it really helped me understand better English grammar, but not just English grammar, but the playfulness of words, the way words come together. You can borrow words from other languages. Of course, any language such as English does borrow a lot of words from Spanish or from French or from many, many other languages too. And so something about learning other languages actually makes you more playful in your own maternal tongue. It makes you more playful. It makes you more aware of how to use it. And so I wouldn't say this is what you must do to be a writer, but I think one of the best things you can do if you're going to write is to be playful with language. And one of the ways to help you be playful is to learn other languages.
It's very good advice. What other languages do you speak?
Just French and Spanish.
Just. Do we have how much?
We have one question from our online audience. They would like to know, they're on chapter 18. Why is Croc Harry turquoise?
Well, Croc, thank you for that question. Why is Croc Harry turquoise? Well, I love the color. I've always loved turquoise. You don't see turquoise crocodiles in reality, and I wanted this crocodile to be kind of unusual, surprising. It is a fantasy. And so why not? Why not make Croc Harry turquoise? I just wanted him to really stand out and have a special color. And even though he seems so threatening at first, he has this beautiful color. And I do love turquoise as a color. So I guess he could have been another color, but turquoise it was.
And he looks great on the book cover.
Thank you.
Turquoise crocodile.
Thank you.
And we have time for one question from the audience. If anyone has a question,
Yes, feel free.
Lawrence, feel free to raise your hand.
Go ahead if you have a question, just say it.
Yeah, go ahead. How long did it take you to write?
How long did it take me to write the book? It took 2 years, 6 months for the first draft, and then 18 months for the next 11 drafts. So 2 years. I started it in Newfoundland, where I have a summer home, and I finished it in Spain. Hey, can I take another question? Sure. In the very back row, would you like to ask your question? Do I speak my 2 languages fluently? I speak French pretty well as I speak English, and I speak Spanish comfortably. You know, like I read and write and can have good conversations that are detailed, but I'm not like totally like speaking Spanish like a maternal language, but I can hang out comfortably in Spanish, but not perfectly. I still make mistakes. And you have to be willing to make mistakes and be okay about looking foolish, you know, when you learn another language, and also be okay not being perfect. Yes, in the very back on the left there, yes?
Do you remember if there was like, do you remember the one moment, or if there was one moment that you just immediately knew that you loved writing?
Yes, honestly, I know this sounds kind of hard to believe that the moment I knew I loved writing was when I wrote that letter for the kitten and got the kitten, and I thought, yes, now I'm going to write a letter to get my first pair of Levi jeans. Now I'm going to write a letter to get my first pair of Adidas Rom running shoes, which were all the rage when I was a young boy. And I just started hitting my dad up with letter after letter after letter, and I was so excited because the letters made me get the things I wanted. So I thought, more of this, please. So really, I started writing passionately when I was 6 because they were getting me the things I wanted.
So we've had survival tips and also tips on how to get things from your parents.
Letters will actually move a parent more than you see something at the kitchen table, maybe you'll get it. You write a letter, your chances just went up by 50%. Yes, on the left there, yes?
Did you write stories about your other children too?
Yes, I've written stories about all of the children. Beatrice, being the youngest, she was the last one to have a story written about her, to have a character named after her, have a book dedicated to her. So Beatrice was the last one, and she was getting impatient because she was the youngest. She was the last one to be recognized in the book. Yes, go ahead.
Which one is harder, writing or publishing?
Publishing is really hard if you don't already have a reputation. You have to have such a thick skin to publish a book because, frankly, you're going to be rejected. And it hurts to be told no. It hurts your feelings and it's discouraging, but you have to keep going and not give up and be persistent and just do it, even though a publisher says no. Go to another one, they may say no. So you have to learn to deal with rejection and not let it destroy you emotionally. So I found it very hard to publish my first book, but after that, it got easy because then I had publishers and people started to know about me. But the first time was really, really difficult. Yes, go ahead behind you. Yes? How old was Beatrice when I first told her the stories about the girl and the crocodile? She was like 3, 4, 5. The stories got a bit more complicated as she got a little older, but she came into my life when she was 3. And by the way, she's delighted that I've done this. And she gave me her permission, of course, to name the book after her and everything. But she was about 3 when she first started hearing stories of girl versus crocodile. At first, they were quite elementary, but then they got more complex as she got a bit older. Can we take one more question? Okay, how about over on this side? Yes?
Who do you go to publish your books?
Who do you go to publish your books? Well, you have 2 choices. You can either go straight to a publisher, but the famous bigger publishers, the ones that you might have heard of, that have a national or international reputation, say mine is called HarperCollins, another might be called Knopf for Penguin, something like that. You can't just walk in and give your book to a major publisher. You need an agent, which is a business person who stands between you and the publisher and tries to persuade the publisher to take your book. And in exchange for trying to persuade the publisher to take your book, they take a commission. They take 15% of everything you earn. So they act for you, but then they take part of your earnings as payment. And so you can either go to a publisher directly if it's a small publisher, or if it's a major publisher with international connections, and you have to go through an agent who's a business person who tries to sell your book on your behalf, to publishers.
Thank you.
I love the questions, by the way. I really, really appreciate that. I wish we could take more, but maybe when we're all done here, if we have a minute, we can chat if you don't have to fly out of the room. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. And thank you, Ebony, for such a lively and fun conversation. I really enjoyed this.
I did too. Thank you for coming out to Vancouver to share your stories with us.
I'm really delighted to be back.